Hey everybody, in a previous video I installed this ceiling fan light combination thing, and I'll be honest, I don't like it very much. It's got some pretty neat party tricks with mood lighting and that sort of thing, but this is my home office and I really don't need those kinds of gimmicks in my light. What I do need is a ceiling fan that can both move enough air around this room to make it comfortable to be in, but not make a whole bunch of noise. And as you can hear, this fan is pretty loud. Let me turn it off. That's so much nicer. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can replace a ceiling fan with a much more traditional one that is going to be very quiet and move enough air to keep the room comfortable. Now, the fan I'm installing does not have any lights integrated into it. So in addition, I'm also going to be showing you how to install some can lights or recessed lighting around the perimeter of this room. Let's get started. The first step is to take some measurements. My fan is more or less in the center of the room, though not exactly centered, and I wanted to space the recessed lighting evenly around the perimeter of the room so that it was nicely balanced with the fan position. Your room may vary, of course, but it's a good idea to measure out and plan your desired lighting positions before you cut into the ceiling. In my case, I wanted to make sure the lights were going to be far enough away from the fan blades that they wouldn't cause a flicker effect when the fan was running, but not so close to the wall that they did not evenly light the center part of the room. This, of course, is a judgment call and will vary by room dimensions, fan size, and your personal preference. Once I knew where I wanted the lights to be, I checked in the area with a stud finder to see if there would be any ceiling joists that would interfere with my install locations. These lights are designed to be installed directly into the drywall of the ceiling, and I found I needed to nudge the light positions just a few inches in a couple of cases to avoid ceiling joist interference. Now, to cut the holes in the ceiling for the recessed lights, I'm going to be using this hole saw in my drill. Now, if you use one of these by themselves, they do make a pretty terrific mess. So you can pick up one of these bowls that is designed specifically to catch the dust while you're cutting with a hole saw like this. These bowls are super flexible, and they have that hole in the center that allows you to put them over the hole saw so they don't spin when the drill does. And what happens is all of the dust and debris that this hole saw is going to make gets caught in this bowl and doesn't fall down on your floor or, more importantly, on your face. Now, one of these buckets will run you about $20 or so, and it seems like sort of an odd thing to spend $20 on that you're only going to need for one little job. So if you're interested in saving some money, you can stop by your local hardware store where they have these little trays that are designed to be put under plants to catch water that might overflow as you water them. As you can see, these trays only run about $2, and it's extremely simple to cut a little hole in the center of them and then mount it on your drill just like you would the more expensive commercial bowl. And in my experience, this solution also works great. When drilling out these ceiling holes, I prefer initially not to cut them all the way out. You see, my attic directly above this room is full of blown-in insulation, and if I cut a 6-inch hole in the ceiling, insulation's just going to pour out of it. So instead, I drill only most of the way through the ceiling. I know this seems counterintuitive, but stick with me here, it'll make a lot more sense in just a few minutes. On one of the light locations, I accidentally cut just a little bit too deep, so I made a quick reinforcing brace to keep the circle of drywall in place for the next part of the process. Now, this is just temporary and will also make a lot more sense later in the video. With the holes cut most of the way through, I next drill out a 1-inch hole directly in the center of each of the light locations. I'll use this small hole to run the wiring, then I'll cut out the rest of the hole with a drywall saw or razor blade after I've wired the light. Then the whole circle of drywall can simply be pushed up into the attic above the light and will lose very little of the insulation in the attic. This will make a lot more sense as you see the rest of the process. Speaking of wiring, I'm going to use 14-gauge Romex wiring. I'm tying into a 15-amp circuit, so this is the right size wire to use. Other than the insulation, I wasn't exactly sure of what was up in my attic above this room, and I was trying to avoid going up into the attic because when I did this project, it was extremely hot up there. So the technique I'm applying here is to insert a fish tape into the small center hole and try to feed it through the attic and out the small center hole of the next light location. Now, if like me, you're having a little bit of trouble getting the fish tape to go from one light location to the other, you're probably going to need to go get someone to help you. And what you'll do is you'll have one person keep trying to get that fish tape from one side to the other. Just push it up into the hole, feed out enough so that it should be past where the other location is, and then swing it side to side. While they're doing that, get a regular coat hanger like this and unbend it so that you just have a nice long straight piece of wire. Put a hook in the end of it and put that hooked end up through the side where you're trying to get the fish tape to come through. I think you can see where we're going with this. The idea here, of course, is to catch that fish tape in the hook and pull it down through the other side. See if I can demonstrate for you. This is much easier as a two-person job, so as my son is feeding the fish tape through one hole, I'm reaching up into the attic with that bent coat hanger and trying to catch the fish tape. It's very easy to feel when the hanger hits the fish tape, as it has a distinctive metal-on-metal clanky feel, and both I and my son can feel it when the hanger hits the fish tape in the attic. I know it's a little hard to see in this camera angle, but we were able to use this technique to get the fish tape pulled through these two light locations easily. I then attached the Romex to the fish tape and we pulled it back through, leaving about a foot or so extra at each hole. Encouraged by our early victory here, we thought we were on a roll, but the next locations proved to be much more difficult. I didn't know this at the time, but there's a bunch of large HVAC ducting in the attic directly above this room, and the fish tape simply never had a chance of getting from one light location all the way across the room to the other light locations without running into stuff up there. Alright, so I was able to use my fish tape technique to pull wire from this location over to this one, and from that one over there to the one above the camera. Unfortunately, I was not able to get one pulled from this side of the room to that side of the room. I don't have to go down both sides, I just have to connect on one side or the other, and just could not get that fish tape and coat hanger technique to work. So unfortunately, I am going to have to go up in the attic. However, it's really hot outside today. It's been over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and so my attic, I cannot go up there until late tonight when it has cooled off. So in the meantime, I'm going to work on wiring the new fan in and the changes I'm going to have to put to the switch. Let's get started with that. Here's the fan I'll be installing today. This is not sponsored in any way. I purchased this fan with my own money, and my wife and I have the same model installed in our bedroom and really like it, so we thought we would just use the same fan in the office. It appears that this specific fan has been discontinued, but I'll leave a link in the description to some great similar fan options. Like most fans, it comes with all the typical installation parts and pieces you'll need, as well as excellent instructions that explain multiple different ways you can mount and install this fan. I always find it easiest to assemble and do the preliminary setup of a ceiling fan on the floor, where there's plenty of room to work. Ceiling fans can be a bit awkward to assemble, so make sure you follow the instructions carefully. With the new fan ready to install, I shut off the breaker to this room as it was time to remove the old fan. Removal is easy, and with just a little twist, the fan comes off of its mounting plate. I then just double checked to make sure that the circuit was not live and disconnected the wiring and removed the fan from its mounting plate. I then mounted the installation hardware that would support the fan. Now a quick note here. In my previous video, I covered the importance of making sure the junction box in your ceiling is rated to support a fan. Check out the link above for more details, but I've already verified that this box is fan rated, so I could install this fan hanger with confidence. With the hanger up, the rest of the fan install is straightforward. Lift the fan into position on the hanging bracket and then connect the wiring following the instructions. Tuck the extra wiring up into the junction box and finish installation with the beauty cover and trim. The fan comes with its own switch to control it, so we'll need to remove the existing light switch from the wall and prepare to replace it. Another quick note on safety: even though I've turned off the breaker for this room, always check to make sure that a circuit is really dead before you reach in and start disconnecting any wiring. When I was doing this check, I ran into some weird behavior with this circuit. Alright, so my circuit tester here keeps telling me that this might be hot, but it's intermittent. And I have flipped the breaker and nothing else in this room is hot, so I'll demonstrate. If I'm holding this here and I come close to this wire, it tells me there's current there. Shouldn't be, but it tells me that there is. So I've grabbed my multi-tester here and we're just going to see if there is in fact any current on either of these. We're showing nothing there at all. And let's see if we can get inside these wire nuts well enough to take a check there as well. 0. So always double check. If you've got a multi-tester like this, that's a great way to verify that the circuit is definitely dead and safe to work on. One of the big changes I'm going to need to make here is this single gang box is not large enough. I need to have a second switch here. One's going to be for the fan and the other for the lights. So I need to remove this single gang box and cut a hole larger that will fit a double gang box. This is called an old work box, and the way this works is it's got these little tabs that will flip up when you put it into the wall. So you put it into the wall, and then when you go to tighten it, these tabs will flip up and lock against the inside of the drywall. So I just need to mark how wide I need to cut All right, I'm fairly certain that the stud is on this side of the box, but to make sure, we'll use a stud finder here. Just put it on the wall and press that button there to calibrate it. Once that's ready, then we can go ahead and start to test it. Found the edge of a stud, and there's the center, so that is right. And there's nothing over on this other side. Okay, so the stud's on this side. We can cut extra drywall out on this side to put in our double gang box. I start by trimming around the box with a razor blade and drywall saw to remove any extra drywall mud and make it easier to remove the box. This also helped me confirm which side of the box the stud was on. I find it easiest to just use the new box to measure and mark the corners. Then just grab any straight edge. I'm using the straight side of a wall plate here to draw the cut lines, and then a drywall saw to cut out the extra drywall piece. The old box is attached to the stud in the wall with 2 nails, one at the top and one at the bottom. I find the easiest way to remove a box like this without damaging the walls is to grab a hacksaw blade and slide it in between the box and the stud, and then use it to cut through the nails. This is a somewhat tedious process and requires some patience, but I've always been happy with the results. However, if you know of other techniques for removing old boxes like this that are easier or faster, I'd love to hear about that down in the comments. With those nails cut, I could then fish the old box out of the wall. Now note that you'll have to be gentle while you do this to minimize damage from the nails at the top and bottom of the box as you wrestle the box out through the hole. I then disconnected the old switch and wiring connections and completely removed the old junction box, and things were going really smoothly at this point. However, all right, well, I've got that box out of the wall, and now I've discovered something I was not expecting. So I want to take just a second to talk about what I do when a project goes sideways. That's what's happened here. You see, I've got this long drill bit, and I was planning to use it to drill up through the top plate of this wall. But when I opened up this wall, I discovered it's got a whole bunch of insulation inside it. I don't know why they've insulated this particular wall. On the other side, it's just a closet, but it's insulated. And that's going to make it very difficult to use this drill bit to kind of drill up through that top plate. So instead, I'm going to have to figure out a different way to get a wire pulled from here up into the attic space where those lights are. And I think what I'm going to have to do is go up into the attic and drill down through the top plate of this wall. Now, I was trying to do this project without going into the attic at all because of how hot it is, but I was not able to get the wiring pulled on a couple of those lights either, so I have to go up there anyway. I may as well just make sure that I can take care of both jobs while I'm up there. So as I'm looking at my watch, I'm realizing this is going to be a pretty late night. My attic is finally starting to cool off, but it's still over 100 degrees up there. I need to give it another hour or two before I can go up and do the extra work that I want to do for this project. So I would like to hear from you down in the comments. Have you ever had a project like this that's gone just completely off the rails to the point that you've had to come up with a completely new plan and figure out a different way to get the project done? Yeah, hit me down in the comments. I'd love to hear about that. All right, well, I've had a little bit of time to think about this, and I've decided to just try snaking this drill bit up through the insulation. I don't think this is going to work very well, and my main concern is that I don't want to hit any of the wiring that's already in the wall, because if I were to drill through that, that would be a pretty big disaster. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape my borescope to the end of this drill bit and just see if I can snake it up through the wall and through all the insulation and get up to that top plate in a place that's safe where I won't drill through any other wiring. Of course, I'm not going to turn the drill on. I'm just going to use this kind of to explore what's up in this wall cavity. And if it looks like it's going to be a good path, I'll pull the whole thing back out, take off the borescope, put it back in, and drill the hole. Initially, I tried inspecting up along the stud that was on the left side of this wall cavity, but I found that that path was blocked with a lot of insulation, and I was concerned about snagging the drill on the insulation or hitting the existing wiring on that side when trying to drill up through the top plate. I then switched to inspect the stud on the far side of that wall cavity, and I discovered this. Ooh, look at that. We do have nice, clean access to that top plate. Looks like they did not put the insulation all the way up, and I can snake up along this other stud that does not have any wiring running along it. Okay, well, I'm going to pull the camera back out, put this on my drill, and let's put a hole up into my attic. I'm through. Just as with the fish tape, it's easy to simply tape the Romex to the end of the drill rod so that I could go up into the attic and pull the drill rod and the Romex up through the hole. This can be a little tricky to try and do on your own as the wiring can bind, etc., as it feeds into the wall. So I asked my wife to help out by feeding the wiring in through the wall down below as I pulled up from above. Unfortunately, we discovered that my extension rod junction with the long drill bit simply would not fit through the hole in the top plate of the wall. I'm not sure exactly what was going on here. Either the hole size was not large enough or the angles were such that it simply just would not fit. So again, it was time to adapt the plan and pivot to something new. I had her pull the drill rod and the Romex entirely back down into the room, and then I ran my fish tape down through the top plate in the wall into the same wall cavity, trying to follow where the drill had been. She was then able to reach into the wall and grab the fish tape, and then attach Romex to it so I could pull it back up into the attic. Now in retrospect, I should have just tied some string to the drill before she pulled it down, and then I would have been able to use the string to pull the Romex back up, but the way that we ultimately did it worked just fine. So now I had Romex coming from the switch location up into the attic. With my wife in the room below, we finished running the wiring from the attic down into the first light location, and then from that light across the long span of the room to one of the other far lights. For each light location, she would stick a bent metal hanger up into the ceiling, which was long enough to get above the insulation where I could then easily see it, and I'd attach the Romex to the hanger where she could then pull it down into the room. Using this technique, we quickly completed running all the wiring for this project. As I mentioned, I was originally trying really hard to not go up into the attic because it was so hot, but in retrospect, I really should have just waited until it was very late in the evening and done it this way. It was so much faster. Now that the wires have all been pulled, it's time to feed them into the back of the new junction box for the switches and get that installed into the wall. All right, I've pulled all my wires and now we've just got this mess here to deal with. I know it can look pretty daunting and confusing, but I'm going to go through exactly what gets connected where and why. And bear in mind that this may not be exactly the way that yours is set up at your house, but this is how mine is set up, so I'll walk you through it. First off, we've got two different leads coming in from the bottom. They're actually coming from an outlet that is down below there, and it actually makes a loop. It goes from that outlet up to here and then back down and over around the corner to another outlet. And so what these are doing, really all they're doing is providing a place to tap in power for the switch that was already here. That's what these wires here are for. The new wire that I've just run, which is going to be for my lights, is right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie the neutrals and the loads together off of the two that were coming from below. And then I'm also going to wire in the switch to the same bundle of wires, and I'll wire in my fan switch to the same bundle of wires following the fan switch instructions, of course. So that's how this all works. Once the connections are all finished, it's important to try to tuck the excess wiring back into the box as neatly as possible. With a pretty full box like this one, especially since the fan controller is an extra deep device, this may take a surprising amount of work. As you do this, be careful to make sure all your connections stay intact and nothing has a chance of shorting out. Then screw your switches loosely into place. We're not going to tighten them down yet because we're not quite ready to put the wall plate on. These are the lights I'll be installing today. I picked them up on Amazon and I'll leave a link to them below in the description. They are LED lights, but they install using the same size hole as traditional recessed can lighting. So if I decide to swap them out in the future for a can or some other type of light, I'll have lots of options. They include a junction box suitable for my installation and all the electrical connectors I'll need. All right, it's the next morning and I've got a window open so I can see a little bit better in here, and hopefully you can too. The next step is to go ahead and wire up the junction boxes that come with these lights. These have little knockout ports in them. I'm just going to pop out the port. We'll feed the wire inside and then we'll complete our connections. The easiest way to knock out the holes on the side of the junction box is to use a screwdriver in the slot in the hole to pry it open, and then just bend it back and forth a few times to break it off. In this example, I'm showing how to wire up one of the lights that serves as a junction to another light. Strip back about 6 inches of the outer wiring sheath, then strip back about a ½ inch or so of the neutral and the hot wires. Feed the wires into the knocked out holes, and then use the included wire connectors to connect the hots, the neutrals, and the grounds following the instructions that came with the lights. Once all the connections are finished, carefully fold all the excess wiring into the box and close the lid. With the wiring completed, we're ready to install the light. Use a drywall saw or razor blade to finish the last part of that cutout for the light, but leave about an inch or so uncut. Then connect the light to the junction box with its included pigtail and push the ceiling cutout and the junction box up into the ceiling as you mount the light all in one motion. This prevents insulation from pouring out and results in a nice clean install. Pay attention to the foam gasket on the upper side of the light itself and make sure that it lays flat against the ceiling without bunching up. Finally, you won't likely have to deal with this particular situation, but remember that I accidentally cut that one hole just a little too deep and I had to install a brace? Well, now's the time to remove that brace as I wire up that light location. With the lights all wired, it was time for the finishing touches at the switch location. Make sure the switches are lined up vertically and horizontally, and that the cover plate lines up and sits flush against the wall with the switches in it. Then you can put in all the screws and tighten everything down. And with that, all right, well, it's finished. Well, most of it's finished. The room's still an utter disaster. I've got a lot of cleanup to do in here. However, the lights are all installed, the fan is installed, everything's wired up, the switches are ready to go. I'm ready to go flip on the breaker again and try everything out. All right, I've drawn the blinds so the room's a little darker. Let's turn on these lights for the first time. Oh, wow. Oh, this is just what I was looking for in this room. The light is easily diffused everywhere. There's no single pinpoint of light. There's plenty of light in the room. Oh, this is great. All right, let's try the fan out. Go ahead and put it on its highest setting. There it goes. The fan is working as well. That's great. Put it all the way down on low. It's so quiet. You can't hear the fan at all. And even on low, it's moving more air than that other fan did when it was on high. Oh, this is great. Really happy with how this turned out. Now these lights do have a little party trick. That is, if you turn them off and then back on within a few seconds, they've got this kind of night light. It's a sort of a gimmick, and I'm not sure I'm really going to use it, but I thought I'd show you what it looked like in case you're considering these lights for yourself. It is a nice yellow, warm sort of light that would be good for in the evenings or late at night. And to flip them back to white, you just turn them off and then back on again. Cool. Here's how the light looks in the room, kind of in the areas where we'll be at our desks. And forgive the mess, you know, it's been a bit of a project. I've got a lot of cleaning up to do, but I love how well distributed the light is and how bright this room is now. It's fantastic. All right, well, this project is finished and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. The lighting in this room is fantastic now. There's plenty of it and it's nice diffuse and is gonna be great for when I'm in here working. Also, the ceiling fan is moving plenty of air now, even just on low, and it's not making any noise at all. So I'm really, really happy about that as well. Hey, if you've enjoyed this project, you can let me know about that with a thumbs up down below. If you've got any questions or comments, or if you notice that there's something kind of brain dead or just dumb that I did in this project, tell me about that down in the comments. I love hearing from you about that. And if you're interested in seeing more projects like this, of course, you can think about subscribing, but there's never any pressure from me about that, of course. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Now, this room's a disaster. Yeah, this project, as most of them do, got a little out of hand. I've got some cleaning up to do. Of course, if you're interested in seeing more projects like this, I choked, literally. Let's try that one more time. This thing keeps hitting me in the head.